Obesity. It's a subject we keep coming back to. Overnight, some figures suggesting that obese people cost the National Health Service twice annually what those who are not obese cost the NHS. And this comes at a time when the NHS tells us that in England, 2/3 of us are either overweight or obese, 26% obese. I'm joined by Tam Fry, chairman of the National Obesity Forum. How rapidly is this situation worsening?
Difficult to say, but certainly over COVID, it really leapt. And we're talking probably about 0.5% every 2-3 years.
Right, OK. So 1 in 4 people in England, and I'm assuming the figures for Scotland and Wales will not be dissimilar.
They're the same. Are
obese. The National Health says it's costing them an absolute fortune. How? Why? If you look at the figures, sort of in 1970, 50 years ago, very few people were obese. What has happened?
Basically, what's happened is that we've seen the influx of the fast food market.
Yeah.
And people eating now 20 to 50% more than they really should be doing. The advertising is relentless in selling food to people. Children are targeted, and children are now becoming perhaps the big problem for the future. And it'll continue until the government does something to stop it.
Well, or people choose to change their lifestyles, and government can have some impact on that, and I accept that. But it's kind of also, isn't it, we don't cook in the way that we used to. I think a lot of people just don't know how to cook these days. And, yeah, the fast food culture is literally all around us, wherever we go. But it's all well and good wringing our hands. But, Tam, what interests me is actually what can be done. Can government give a lead on this?
Yes. Very simply, it can be. And, in fact, Boris Johnson, back in 2019, commissioned the chief medical officer to write him a structure as to what should be done. And this she did. Can I show it to you?
Do.
Well, it looks like this. Each of those items are one of the things...
Very substantial, yeah.
One of the things that needs to be done.
Wow.
And it covers every element of society. Now, I don't know whether she thought they should all be done at once, but certainly her object was to have the majority of them under the control of a Cabinet Office committee.
So this was put on Boris Johnson's desk when he was Prime Minister?
That's correct. On the 10th of October 2019.
And what was done?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No, and what is perhaps more disgusting...
But hang on a second, Tam. Boris Johnson said to the nation that he was on a big diet, that we all had to lose weight?
Yep. As far as I'm concerned, it was a load of guff. And Boris Johnson also said, 3 years earlier, that he would attack childhood obesity. And childhood obesity, in my view, is the really #1 issue to be addressed.
And that's leading to people getting type 2 diabetes quite early in life, struggling in the workplace, etc., etc. But what can government do? I mean, George Osborne had a go at doing something, didn't he? Now,
yes.
he put taxes on sugary drinks.
A levy, but can I correct you? Levy is different from tax.
OK, go on.
Tax goes straight to the consumer, and they pay for it. Levy is a carrot, if you will, to the industry to do something to reformulate its food and make it better. And he did this with the sugary drinks. And he said to industry, if you don't bring down the quantity of sugar, I will levy you. And he set 3 levies.
Yeah.
And what happened? People thought that it would never work. But the very next day, all the boardrooms of all the industries got around and said, what are we doing paying money to the government for? We'll take the sugar out. And the sugar levy has been the outstanding success. It's taken 45% of sugar out of sugary drinks. But more importantly than that, the object of the operation was to reformulate. And the reformulation allowed people the chance to buy drinks which were less sugary or no sugar.
Yeah.
And industry profited. And in fact, everybody has gained. It's a win-win situation.
Well, I must admit, I do now buy light tonics to drink at home as opposed to the full sugary ones, and I don't notice the difference. I've got used to it.
It's a question of acquiring taste, and it's a shock to the system at the beginning, but after a period of time, the taste buds adjust to it, and it's like never happened. I mean, it's the same as seatbelts. Everybody flew up in their eyes about seatbelts. We will not wear them. This is an infringement on our liberty. 6 months later, people were wearing seatbelts.
So Osborne did a very positive thing. But let's get back to that, childhood, youth, obesity. We took this show on the road the other week to Crawley in West Sussex. There were a couple of schools there that had no playing fields. But I just could not believe it. So does school have a role to play in this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. School have an educational role in terms of learning things at the desk, but they also have a real responsibility of making sure that children get the right amount of activity every day. 1 hour a day. Theresa May brought it in about 7 years ago and said schools should have half an hour a day and they should be responsible for making sure the other half hour was also done in out-of-school clubs. Hasn't happened.
Just hasn't happened. When we look at America, and this country follows America very often in social trends, the obesity problem is, just ridiculous. Are you optimistic that we can improve the situation or not?
I'm not at all optimistic, but I am optimistic that somebody at some stage in Whitehall will say, we are losing £58 billion every year because of the obesity and the comorbidities, the other conditions which it engenders. This has got to stop, because £58 billion from the Exchequer every year is a vast sum of money. And at that point, somebody, and hopefully it'll be the Chancellor, because remember in the old days, Jeremy Hunt was the health minister.
Yeah.
He promised that he would halve childhood obesity by 2030. Hasn't got a hope in hell of doing it, but he knows what the problem is, and he's got to have to sort it out. Otherwise, we will be disastrously poor.
I fear you're right. Tam, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. Yeah, it is difficult to be optimistic about this, but let's hope and pray something gives.